All right, y'all. Welcome back to Project 12th edition of this podcast. And what a journey it's been so far. So, if you've watched any one of the last 11 episodes, I appreciate you. If you're new here, I also appreciate you because now you have the opportunity to watch the other 11 episodes, including last week's episode, which I did with my friend Dave, who also has a podcast that's called Just Last Week. So, you check him out and also check out the other episode that I did with him. It does have a lot of relevance to this episode, almost like a two-part episode to what I'm doing today, but it's a little bit different in terms of the overall theme. So you definitely still want to watch it. And then all of the other 10 episodes because you just should, because I think they're amazing. Anyway, today we're going to look at a couple things with negative mindsets. Really sure what I'm going to title this podcast yet, but I was almost going to say, as you can tell by the title of this, but I don't really know what I'm going to title it yet. So it's going to be about negative mindsets. And there's really ultimately two general ways to look at things. You can either find the positive, and sometimes that takes a lot of work, especially if you're in a situation that is very negative, or you can just take the easy route and just look for the negative, because I can tell you right now, it is very easy to find negative things about really anything. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, anything. You can find negative things all the time, sad things, anything that'll put you in a bad mood or depressed mood or whatever. You can find it. I promise you it's out there. And if you if you haven't found it, then you really don't need to be watching this episode, because there's nothing I can say that'll change your mind. But if you're in that negative mindset, then you know what I'm talking about. You've seen a lot of the people on Facebook, or you've even been that person on Facebook. Let's be real here. I've been negative myself in smaller situations, bigger situations in my past. I'd like to think that nowadays that's not much of an issue. I feel like where my issue comes into play is when I'm driving on the road. And I'm not going to lie, it's tough sometimes because I've kind of figured it out. When I'm driving, it's more like I'm anxious about the cars around me. If there's no cars around me, then I just kind of cruise and I'm doing my thing. If there's cars around me, it's tough because then I get into this mode of I need to get out of their way, or I don't want them to hit me, so I need to go a little bit faster to kind of pass them so that I don't get involved in a wreck. And part of that may be stemming from my past experiences. I was in a wreck last August, and luckily I'm okay, but some of that may have stemmed from that. So I struggle with it too. I'm not perfect. I've said that many times before on my episodes. I'm just doing this podcast from experience, and I feel like I have a lot of value to provide a lot of people when it comes to the podcast. One of the most important things when it comes to mindsets, and when you look at things either half full or half empty, the cause of that is going to be your surroundings. I actually read or heard somebody, I don't even know who it was, but it doesn't matter for this particular episode because I'm going to put it in my own words. It was something to the effect of, if you take a positive person and put them in a negative environment, that person will eventually conform to the negativity that is around them, and vice versa. If you take a negative person and put them in a positive environment, it is likely to have a positive effect on that individual. There are many examples, but you can just think of one in your own life where you've either been the positive person in a negative situation, or you've been a negative person in a positive situation, or maybe you know somebody that has been that person before, one or the other. You can probably realize that to be true. And I have personally seen that to be true as well. But one thing that you can change, especially if you're in that situation, if you're in a negative environment and you don't want to be, like it's bogging you down, you feel like there's just no hope and you get depressed and sad about it. By the way, been there, done that. If you're in that situation, you can do a couple things but it can sometimes be tough depending on your ability to get out of that situation. The first thing I would start with, if it's just a mental block to where you're mentally unhappy and you feel like nobody likes you and you have a lot of overthinking type stuff happening every day, my best suggestion would be to stay busy. And if you don't know or even don't want to stay busy, because sometimes that effect can just be a negative spiral effect to where you have stuff to do, but you don't do it because you're depressed or sad or whatever, and you're in that negative mindset. And then from there, it literally piles on and piles on. So there's several circumstances, but at some point it has to stop, right? At some point, your grief has to come to an end. And like I said, I've personally experienced that. I'm on the other side of that now, and I'm doing this podcast to help people like the person I used to be 4 years ago and even before that. So it does stop at some point, but you can do a couple of things. Stay busy. What do I mean by that? You can go for a walk, 15, 20, 30 minutes, clear your mind, put some music in. And when I say music, sometimes it has to be positive music, not for example, I love Juice WRLD, but his music is definitely not the prime example for what I want to be talking about on this episode. So sometimes unconscious or not unconscious, subconscious decisions like that will lead you to a negative mindset and you don't even know it. But subconsciously, if you're listening to Juice WRLD, you might find it relatable. And if you find it relatable, that's a problem because his music is not for happy people in general. And because if you really listen to his words, you'll understand what I mean. Or if you know who Juice WRLD is. But if you put on music, even if you put on positive motivational shit in your ears, podcasts, or Gary Vaynerchuk is a good person to listen to when that stuff is kind of taking you down the wrong path. You can listen to him. I promise that helped me a lot. You can listen to any one of motivational speakers. If there's some sort of thing you want to work on, you can look up that on YouTube. There's a lot of ways you can stay busy, but staying busy starts with staying curious. You need to find stuff to learn about. You need to find stuff to do. Don't just wait for it to come to you. Literally think about what your interests are. Think about what you enjoy doing and do that. Because I guarantee you, it is unlikely you're going to stay unhappy if you're doing something you enjoy, or even if you're around people that you enjoy. Again, negative person in a positive environment, humans generally conform to the majority. And I actually saw some research on that as well. There was a person or they did a test, obviously, they had to do it with different people. But they did a study, and these people were college students, I believe. I'm not sure, but I'm going to put in my own words because I know it's true and I looked it up, I promise. Basically, we'll keep it at that. College students who obviously went to class and they're learning about stuff, and there are actors in this scenario which started out as one actor who blurted out the wrong answer and was very blatant about it. And that person who was not the actor, at first, obviously, when there's only one person blaring out the wrong answer and everybody kind of seems to know it's wrong, then they're just going to brush it away, laugh at it, whatever, and then they're going to say the right answer and move on. But the study was progressive to where they added 2 actors. They added 3, 4, 10 actors, right? And these actors would agree with each other. When one actor would shout out the answer, even though it was clearly incorrect, the other actors would start to agree and start to corroborate that answer. And it made the subject more likely to second guess themselves and more likely to conform to the incorrect idea, even though they know it's incorrect. And that study was part of the reason why I wanted to do this episode, because that right there can just demonstrate to you that it is your environment that plays a lot of what your mindset is going to be, especially if you're younger, because you don't know any better. When you're growing up in a negative environment, it may make you a negative person, and it may take a while for you to break yourself out of that, but I promise it's possible. You get kids in a positive environment, it generally has positive outcomes. Like a lot of that is one step at a time that builds up into something bigger. And sometimes you don't have the blessing of having all of that handed to you. In fact, I'd say most people don't, especially since, staying on topic, but just adding a different layer here, especially since social media adds a lot of that, because you could grow up a positive person, but then a new idea comes along and you're not familiar with it, and it kind of takes you back to when you were a child and didn't know any better. When social media came around, it was a way to keep up with every single person you knew all the time, and it created a lot of FOMO for people, which then made them feel bad about themselves because they weren't involved. It made them feel bad about their appearance because people were photoshopping pictures and taking pictures only at the right lighting and the right angles and all of that. So it made people insecure. And then from there, that spirals down to a negative mindset and overthinking and all of that. Personally, I've had a few conversations with some of my friends. I don't think social media is a problem at all for most people. It can be a problem the way that you use it, for sure, especially if, not going to get politics involved or anything, but some people who are into the whole politics thing, especially if they think there's some conspiracies or corrupt things going on, which we all know there are at some degree, but especially if that is involved, because then it's like, again, spiraling out of control. When you have FOMO like that and you watch somebody post everything about their life, and to be fair, most people only post the good things about their life. So it makes it appear that they have this perfect life that they really don't have. So there's that too. Like, you got to realize that even though somebody's life may look perfect on social media, it isn't. Everybody has their own struggles just like you. And on the flip side of that, if you only post positive stuff, which is good, I think only posting positive stuff is good. But like, when you do that, some people may think that your life is perfect and they get down on themselves. Like, I think anybody who's doing that should just literally stop immediately. And the best way to do that is just to do not worry about anybody else at all. I know some people who just delete social media, but that doesn't get rid of the problem, because eventually you come back to social media because, first of all, if you're in the game, you know how the game is, and then from there you'll want to be a part of it, even in the slightest, for the most part. Some people, again, speaking from majority and experience here, but some people do social media and then they just completely disconnect from it. Some people don't do it at all because they think it's a bad idea. And again, I think social media, Discord, Instagram, all of that is a great idea. It's an easier way to match with people who are of your interest. In terms of, if you like disc golf, you can go into a disc golf group on Facebook and then make new friends that way. I think it's amazing. You can find people who have your common ground and your interests a lot easier. But most people don't use it that way. And that's how people get into that mindset. If that's part of your problem, definitely stepping away is going to help for the short term, but it's not going to help for the long term. If that's your constant habit of you looking at somebody, getting down on yourself, looking at somebody, getting down on yourself, and then listening to sad music and all of that whole cycle. I've done that before and it sucks. If you're in that cycle, the way that I fixed it for myself was to go on that small walk for 15, 30 minutes. Find chores to do to get your mind off of it. Do your own life. Make your own table, as Eric Thomas said. Make your own table. You're not worried about somebody else's table because you're making your own. Like he said, that's so true. I watch Eric Thomas a lot too, and he's literally preaching to the choir a lot of stuff that he says. So anyway, that is part one of what I want to talk about. Just to recap, what you consume and what your environment is, that's going to have a large impact on your day to day. So, and if you want to be a more positive person, then you need to look at positive people. You need to have somebody who is already positive and watch and learn what they do and how they go about it. If you're already positive, then maybe you can help somebody who isn't positive, like what I'm doing with this podcast. You never know who you might be helping at some point. So it's nice if you have the ability to just do it. Next, so there's a few things I want to talk about for sure. The next part of this topic is it's pretty interesting because some people will also get down on themselves if they care too much about what other people think. And I think this is a big issue for a lot of people. They're worried about stuff that they don't need to be worried about, especially when it comes to your day-to-day stuff. When I'm on social media, because it kind of relates, so I'll transition. When I'm on social media and some of my friends message me, and then I open it and I may be busy, so I don't get back to it later on. I've actually had some of them message me, not to call them out or anything because I won't name any names, but obviously if you're listening to this, you may know who you are. I have mad love for every single person. I'm not mad when I say this, no disrespect or anything. Some of them reach out to me, they're like, oh, okay, sure, whatever, you're just gonna ignore me. And for me, that's like, no, I wasn't ignoring you. I was busy. And sometimes people will say, oh, well, if you have time to open the message, you have time to reply. For me, that is just not the case. Even if I open the message, I might have something else going on at the same time. And if I read the message, and sometimes if I think it's a quick answer, and then that particular message is not a quick answer, or I have to think about it or whatever, then I won't get back to them right away. And sometimes people say, oh, maybe you could just text them, hey, I'll text you back in a little bit. Yeah, that's cool too. My brain doesn't go that way. I don't think that way. It was not natural for me to do that, but some people do. For me personally, it just seems a little selfish for that person to expect anybody that they message, including myself, who's been on the other side of that before, message them at literally any time that that person messages them. They expect it to be immediate. And for the most part it is, but like we all have lives, we're all busy, you know, especially if you have kids or whatever going on. Like a lot of that stuff is just you go from one thing to the next, and that's how my brain works. When I'm on my phone, you know, there's a lot of social media apps that I use for entertainment. So sometimes if I open a message, I'll get a notification from a text message. You know, like I open a Snapchat message and then I get a text message and then I see that pop up. So I click on it. And then once I'm done with that message, I'll forget that somebody responded to me. So then I go into TikTok and I scroll for an hour. And then I realize when I go back to Snapchat that I haven't responded. Like things like that, just because my brain goes all over the place. And it's part of the reason why I struggle with this podcast, and I'm working on it. I know that that's an issue of mine. But part of that is people are worried about, oh, you're ignoring me and all of that. And I get it that some people are just not genuine people. And I'm coming for you. Like Gary Vee said this the other day. I feel like I resonate with it well, so I'm just gonna repeat it. But he said, hey, all this negativity, I'm coming for you. I'm going to find you. I'm going to suffocate all the negativity out of your life. And that's going to be my mission for the next 50 years. And I want to do something similar to that with my own twist on it at some point when I start to figure out this podcast and get into a bigger groove than what I'm already in. But a lot of people are just worried about that. And it just doesn't make sense because to me, I've been the person that's waiting on a response from somebody all day. 2 hours go by, 3 hours go by, they haven't responded. I'm just playing on my phone. As soon as I get that message, I immediately respond because I've been waiting for it all day. Now, I don't wait for somebody else to message me anymore. I just go out and do my own thing. And I go out and I'm trying to make my own table with people around me. Obviously, I care about my friends so much, or else they wouldn't be my friends. That's just a genuine person in me. I don't have any like ulterior motives when it comes to opening a message and not responding. It's just how my brain works. A lot of people are worried about that, and they shouldn't be, because we're all busy. And even you should be busy doing your own stuff. I want the most success for every single one of my friends and family. And if I'm working on that, then you should be too. Like, we should just all be in this position where it's just weird because some people are not there yet. And that's why I'm doing this podcast. A lot of times, I have another point here that I want to bring up just because I saw it in my notes. If you are going through life and sometimes you don't really know what's going wrong, you just have a lot of stuff going wrong, and you're just like, oh, why me? Why me? That's part of the issue as well. You have several different tools to your advantage when it comes to having a positive mindset. One of them is accountability. And one step further than that, knowing that there's only so much that you can control. And if you just do what's best for you, and obviously think about other people that are important in your life as well, but at the end of the day, you have to make your own decisions, and it has to be best for you. And hopefully that decision can also be best for whoever is in your inner circle. Most people would want to do both. Sometimes you can't, whatever. But in that scenario, you still have to do your own decisions because it's your life. You have to make your own decisions. And worrying about all this extra stuff that you can't control is part of the issue. I just saw this the other day. Dave Ramsey posted something. Literally, it was the best piece of work that I ever seen, and he probably took 5 minutes to make it. Not that the time limit matters on the content, but the content hit for me. And I was very impressed because somebody who can make it in 5 minutes and have it hit for me is pretty good, especially if it was for anybody else as well. But for me, that's pretty good. And it said, it was a checklist. It was literally a note on an iPhone, because I could tell because I have an iPhone. And it said, things you can't control: your government, gas prices, food prices, housing prices, all of that. Things you can control: your actions and your mindset, or something to that effect. And that is how I see pretty much everything that happens around me. There's only so much you can control, and having a negative mindset, sometimes that contributing factor to that is worrying about things you don't need to be worried about because you can't control it anyway. So think about that. I'm going to transition into a couple of different scenarios here that I want to talk about. And I got two different scenarios that were pretty, not necessarily generic, but I know that they exist because I know of people who don't necessarily have this problem, but they fit the description, if that makes sense. Like, and I wanted to do the real life scenarios because it would make it more personable, because I tell my story on here, but I want to tell other stories to see if it clicks as well. So I'm going to try something new today. But I got two scenarios here. The first one is going to be a small business owner who's trying to start a clothing line with a Cricut that they have just in their own home, right? They start to go through all the motions of learning how to do it, setting it up, all of that, right? Once they do that, they post a shop online for people to buy, or they open up the invitation for people who know them personally to message them, and they'll get their order in. For the first few months, you get family and friends ordering, you get a pretty consistent trace of customers because you post and post and post, and people see that, and they keep you keep funneling your customers into the ecosystem of your t-shirt line, right? But after a few months, you notice that your order slowed down, and eventually nobody new has ordered your shirts, and your family friends don't need any more at that moment, so it slows down. At that point, you start to get down on yourself about what went wrong and how you're not doing good, and you need to stop your business, and you lose confidence because nobody wants your product at that given time. There's two things I would do if you're in this scenario, right? Just because you don't have to be in this scenario to know how to respond to it, but this is what I would do. One, I would figure out why you're doing the t-shirt business in general, because that is the biggest factor for if you decide to continue forward. Are you doing it for the money and you want it to be a full-time job or even a side hustle? Or are you doing it because you just truly love to do it? And even if you truly love to do it, it doesn't have to be your full-time job. It could just be something that you enjoy doing on the side too. But you have to figure out which one of those scenarios would be more applicable. Because what I find in general is most people who do things for money don't have any sort of emotional attachment to that particular business or that particular task. And when you don't have any emotional attachment to it, you tend to give up and you tend to lose your reason for doing it or your purpose for doing it. And that may be why, in this hypothetical example, that this person would want to quit or want to stop, because then they run out of reasons to keep going with that particular business. That may be why. So the first thing is figure out why you're doing it. If it is something that you decide to keep going with, then my suggestion would be to not look at it in the form of how much money can it supplement your life with. I would look at it in the form of what experience you can gain from it, what intangibles can you gain from it, especially if it's your passion. And if it's more so your passion than just a source of income, that's even, because any roadblock you're faced with when it's your passion, you can get past it. I promise. There's a lot of roadblocks and nobody is immune to them, so you will get past it. Passion. So in that scenario, that would be what I do, and I would just look at those two things and go from there. Figure out your target consumer is also very important. Who are you trying to sell to? If you're trying to sell to people that don't need t-shirts, then your business is not going to survive. You got to sell to people that need the product you're selling. There's a few ways you can do that. You can do advertising on Facebook for very little and target to your actual target market. Maybe you get random traffic from that. Or you can just try to do word of mouth. Have your friends tell friends tell friends. Word of mouth is an amazing marketing tool to this day. So I'd try any one of those three things, kind of merge them all together at some point, and go from there, because finding out why you're doing something is going to take the load off of you needing to perform at a high level to either impress yourself or impress others. And once you get that down, you don't have to worry about anything else. So for that one, that's what I would do. Scenario 2, the last one I have. I could have done more, but I wanted to keep it more personable to me and maybe more personable to the people that I've observed in the last few months. As I've said in episodes prior, I watch a lot and I observe a lot. So I want to make the content relevant to the people that might be watching so that they get value out of it. That's just how I think about things. Scenario 2, you're an outgoing person and love to talk about anything and everything with people, especially new people, because you realize that your tone of voice, especially new people, but you realize that your tone of voice and your personality isn't the most popular and you tend to rub people the wrong way. What do? First of all, I'm sure you guys can tell that I was reading from my notes there because I messed up. Anyway, what would you do? So this is what I would do. Again, there's a few ways you can look at this. First of all, you really need to figure out more information in this particular scenario. The best way to find a solution to a problem is to know everything about the problem so that you can utilize your full scope of resources. And hopefully that makes sense. Circumstances are very important depending on, because the circumstances would depend on whether or not you react a certain way. And to figure out how to go about this, you have to ask yourself questions. Ask yourself what it is you want to change. You want to change the fact that you rub people the wrong way. And notice I say if. Some people are content with who they are and they feel like they don't need to change for anybody. And that's fine. No hate at all. I don't care. Be who you want to be. I respect it. However, other people don't want to just randomly piss off people for no reason. They want to have empathy and make sure that they can be a person that is easily get alongable, if that makes sense. Easy to get along with. So if that is you, but if you do want to change the fact that you rub people the wrong way, then you need to have a closer look to how you talk to them. And this comes with two catches. First, you have to figure out how you say things to them. And two, you have to figure out your tone when you say it. That's the same thing. So your tone and how you say things. The second would be your word choice. Your word choice and how you say things are coexistent in this scenario. Because you can say, oh my God, you're so beautiful. But if you say, oh my God, you're like so beautiful, and you kind of do like the body language stuff with that and it sounds sarcastic, well, then that person is not going to take that compliment that way. You're like, dude, that was really funny. Or, yeah, that was really funny. Like adding those extra words in and the extra body language and stuff. There's a tone of voice, and I'm sure you know what I talk about when I'm saying that, but you have to figure that out, because if your tone of voice is mostly sarcasm and pessimism and all of that, then most people are not going to want to interact with that mindset. It just, people just don't want to do that. It's just not how it works. And not saying that you have to change yourself to make friends, but you do have to be conscious of how other people act as well as yourself so that you guys can coexist or mesh together. If it's coworkers, I'd say really it doesn't matter. I've had people tell me that I'm not here to make friends, and that's fine, but I go to work wanting to make friends, but even more so not wanting to make any enemies, just because it would make my life harder. Why would I want to do that? When I'm thinking about mindsets in general, life is hard enough. It's hard to keep your mental health at a high level. It's hard to keep your physical health at a high level. It's hard to keep up with everything that you have to keep up with. If you're going to school, if you're going to work, if you have kids who are going to school and you have to find babysitters while you're at work and all of that, right? It's a lot. Life is tough. Nobody is disputing that at all. But the problem is, some people take that to the extreme where it's like, oh, life's tough, so now I'm going to make my entire life tough because I hate the world and the world's against me and all that. It's like, no, life's tough for everybody. It just is. But if you take that one step further and you're trying to make your life harder than it needs to be, just because your life's hard and you're trying to make other people's lives hard because yours is hard currently, then that is just the worst type of attitude, in my opinion. Again, no hate, because if you're in that attitude and that mindset, you're probably going through some stuff that is not ideal, and I've been there before, and my heart is heavy if that is you. Again, I'm gonna keep my messages and email and all that stuff open if you need to reach out. I love talking to people, especially if it's my friends or even random people listening to this. Yeah, I'll just extend that out there. foolishprojectpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions or specific scenarios that you want me to talk about, or just any questions as well that you want me to talk about on the podcast. Even if you don't want me to talk about it on the podcast, I'll be happy to help anyway, just to extend that out there. So that, in a nutshell, is very important to remember because, like I said, life's hard. Why would you want to make it harder? Why would you make it harder on yourself by pissing people off? Because now you have the stress of worrying about that. And the less stress you have, the happier you'll be. And stress and worries kind of coexist. The less you worry about, and not choosing to worry about it, but or it is not choosing to worry about it, but not ignoring it at the same time. That's key. You can acknowledge something. I'm trying to find the right word choice here. You can acknowledge a situation and not worry about it at the same time. For example, when I go to work, I know that I do my best work to the best of my ability, however you want to say that. When I go to work, I clock in, I do my best work, I leave, I come home. As soon as I leave work, I do not worry about it at that moment ever again. So I go back to work. Because that is no longer what I'm doing at that current moment. And I don't care what work has to offer me until I return the next day. Unless it was my passion. You know what I mean? Like, I really enjoy my job, but I really don't enjoy it enough to worry about it 24/7. And I think most people could agree with that, even if they don't enjoy their job, because most people don't want to worry about work 24/7. So if that's your issue, just let it go. Just let it go, because it like I said, life's tough as it is. Adding all these extra layers of worries and anxiety and depression, like a lot of that stuff, you that causes a lot of that. You could just let it go, and it'll be better for you. You know what I mean? You don't have to go out and seek all of these worries when you're on social media and looking at your friends who seem to be having a better life than you, and you're jealous or envious, and then you get down on yourself. I just tune all that out, honestly. You could start with small things. When I was at rock bottom, I would find one thing to do to try to pick myself back up and go from there. And I mean rock bottom from like literally sleeping through my shifts. Like, and just calling off for the day. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I'm taking a mental health day is what I'd call it. And I would literally call off for that day and sleep to try to muster up enough energy to even do anything that day. But what helped me was eventually I got to a point where you're just so low that you're sick of it and you don't want to deal with it anymore. And you just want to get better, and you'll do anything to get to a positive mindset. And that starts with waking up and literally going for a walk, going to the gym, making your bed, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, like all of the normal stuff that you would do, adding in one more, two more, three more things to make it productive over time. And then eventually a lot of your bad worries go away. I tend to overthink when I have nothing to do. I tend to overthink when literally nothing is going on and all I have to do is looking through my phone and overthinking on social media and stuff, which I don't do that anymore. But when I did have that issue, that is what I would do. I feel like that's a lot of my friends out there, and it's tough to watch them go through that battle. But at the same time, I can only help so much. And they're going to have to figure that out on their own at some point. You can only help somebody so much to where it's out of your control at that point, and then they need to help themselves. So it's tough, because there's a lot of angles you can look at that too. Some people are just diagnosed with depression and anxiety and stuff. But at some point you have a road and you come up to a fork in the road, and you can choose to be positive or you can choose to be negative. Some people will always have it easier. Some people may have it not as easy. But you have a choice to make every single day. You can choose to be positive or you can choose to be negative. There's no other options. It's one or the other. It's very binary. It is positive or negative. That's it. There's a lot of circumstances that go into those two roads there, but at some point those circumstances fall into one or the other. So remember that when you're going through something, you have two roads, two paths. Take positive or you take negative. That's it. That's literally it. I want to leave you guys with one question. Shorter episode today. One question to kind of keep it open-ended here. And I'm going to answer it in my own words, but I want you guys to answer it yourselves. And if you have an answer specifically that you want to reach out to me and kind of tell me your experience with this, I'd love to hear it. The question I have is something that some of my friends have asked me before, just about different topics, about different aspects of life. Social media is one of them. I've been asked this before, and it's how do I stay in such a positive mindset all the time? And I'm going to even go a step further and say, even with the way the world plays out in front of me. And in my own words, this just goes back to everything I just talked about. Staying in a positive mindset stems from your environment, and it also stems from what you choose to worry about when it comes to what you can control or cannot control. If you cannot control something that has happened to you, then you do not need to worry about it. Even if you can control something that has happened to you and you could have done it differently, well, now you can't, because you can't take that back and you'll never know the alternative of the decision that you made. So it doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about it. That's how I think about it. Because when you make that decision, a lot of the times it's permanent. You can't take it back. And you definitely can't go back in time. That's 100% of the time. You might be able to fix something that you messed up, but you definitely can't go back in time to do it right the first time. So long answer is what I just said. Short answer, it just comes down to what you choose to worry about, and pretty much it, really. Because again, you can choose to fix something after the fact, but as long as you take the accountability and you go through life controlling things that only you can control and not worrying about anything else, then that's a huge factor. And that's what's helped me over the last few years. I've just started to drop off a lot of things in my life that I used to worry about and then I no longer worry about, because it was ludicrous for me to even worry about it in the beginning. So I hope that helps. Again, shorter episode today. A lot of great content in here. I might end up doing part 2 or part 3 to this episode. I have several guests planned for the next few weeks, next few episodes. Hopefully we can get them on and everything goes to plan, but that is what is in the works right now, and I really want to take this podcast to the next level. So I am brainstorming every which way to go with this podcast, watching other podcasts, taking different ideas on how to expand a lot of that stuff. Part of that starts with your support, so I'm going to do the shameless plugs. YouTube, if you're watching this right now, you can see me. I would appreciate if you look down below and hit that subscribe button. I normally don't do this, but the only way I get this out to more people is if you hit subscribe. If you're on Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, whatever other platform you're listening to this on, hit that follow button or hit that share button and send it to somebody who needs to hear this right now. If you have a friend struggling, you owe it to them to send them any positive content that you possibly can. That is my mission, give you positive content. It doesn't have to be mine, but you owe it to them to do the best that you possibly can to get them out of a rut that they're in. And part of that is what I do and why I do it. So if you know somebody that might get something out of this, something of value for them, not for me. It's not in for me. I don't care if anyone listens to this or not. This will be my video dialogue and my audio dialogue for when I retire in 50 years and my grandchildren grow up and they can listen to this. What I care about is the listener or the viewer who gets something out of this and they get value out of it. That's what I care about. If you know somebody who might get value out of it, share it to them, please. Because we all have a life that is tough at some point, and there is nothing more than we need sometimes than a friend to lean on or some positive shit to just put in your ears and listen to for a while and take a step back and just forget everything for a while. I appreciate if you do that. Again, like or subscribe or follow whatever platform you're watching this on. That would mean the world to me. What would also mean the world to me is if you follow the Instagram as well. I'm going to be ramping this up more in the last couple of weeks. I haven't done any, but in the next few weeks and the weeks following after that, I'm going to be ramping up the production per se and posting some more clips of the podcast and really just any clips in general. It's not going to be regurgitated clips of just whatever you listen to already. It's going to be newer content as well. So if you need a daily boost of mental health, check it out. I'm going to try to do daily stuff. It hasn't happened yet, but that's what we're aiming for. Anyway, I appreciate you guys tuning in for episode 12. I appreciate you guys listening or watching despite my inability to stay on track sometimes. You never know. You really don't know the impact you have on people. I'm just going to put this out there how it is, and hopefully it helps somebody. Anyway, I'll see you guys for episode 13, the big 1-3 coming next week, and we'll just go from there. You guys have a great day. I'll see you next time. Peace.